to you, pre-recorded at Purple Studio. It's the podcast that talks about board games, the board gaming hobby, and how to become a social pariah to your friends. It's Boxfart! Now welcome your hosts for today's show, Red and Blue!
Hello everybody out there. Welcome to the first episode of the Boxfart podcast. I am Blue.
And I am Red.
We'd like to talk to you about board games today, throw in some other silly things, but today we've got a fun format for you. For the very first podcast, we'd like to state some of our intentions for our listeners, some of the things that we strive to have throughout the life of this podcast. We have a commitment to disinterested commentary. We will not be swayed by publishers or creators to review something for pay. If in the future we are asked to review games, we maintain complete editorial authority over our statements and will not submit our commentary for review. We feel pretty strongly about that, don't we, Red?
We certainly do.
We've created this podcast in the hopes of entertaining and informing people who will engage in our hobby and hopefully find the joy in it that we do. While we do occasionally speak in a way meant for hobbyist gamers, our intention is to never gatekeep. A gamer is a gamer, whether they be casual, hardcore, or war gamer. With that, why don't we kick off the inaugural episode? Red, what'd you play this week?
The main game that I played this week was Beyond the Sun by Dennis Chan, published by Rio Grande Games. Beyond the Sun is a tech tree research game where you use your workers to research different technologies with the goal of exploring the galaxy and colonizing planet.
I definitely appreciate how good that game is. I don't like it.
That's okay. You know, it's hard to like a game when you lose every time.
Okay, I
So
don't know about that. I definitely have lost every single time. I don't know. The tech tree aspect of it, I definitely like. I like that that's the goal, and I think even as you unlock your own tech trees or tech trees that you've done, other people gain access to them slowly. But I don't know. The area majority game on the planets never struck me the right way. But it's one of those games I can understand why people like.
yeah, the galaxy exploration and planet control and stuff is definitely a side goal in the game. You get a lot of victory points that way, but the game's built around the idea of researching new technologies to get a tiny little bonus that your opponents don't have yet because they haven't researched it. So I can understand.
I definitely like the dice.
The dice are super cool.
The dice aspect where it's a worker. Oh, now it's a fuel of some kind or it's a resource.
Yeah, so instead of having 6 different tokens, you know, they were able to just print each of those token icons on a different side of the dice. So you just move the dice from one side to the other, as you say, if it's a worker compared to if it's a resource or if it's a spaceship. It's pretty cool.
I like that aspect. I definitely bounced off it, but I can see that it's one of those games, and I understand why people like it, for sure. One of the games I played this week was Hallertau by Uwe Rosenberg. That is one of the newer Uwe Rosenberg games. I think it came out in 2020. I love the interaction of how it feels like an Uwe game, but it doesn't feel like an iteration of an Uwe game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's still got pastoral images, and you got sheep, but I mean, you don't have the same feel as the tightness of Agricola or the sandboxiness of A Feast for Odin or the tile layer of Indian Summer or, you know, Feast for Odin. It just felt like a new concept. I think that it's a new iteration for him in a lot of ways. It doesn't feel like it's a rehash of an old idea. It feels like it incorporates a lot of what he's known for as far as worker placement, but I think the multi-use spaces where I can go there for cheaper, and if you want to follow, you can still do that. I think you said it pretty well that usually in his games, if someone takes the spot that you really need, you're kind of SOL. But in this one, you have the option to follow up.
Absolutely. It's definitely an adaptation of his previous games. I think, to me, the biggest difference that I saw was Agricola, Caverna, Feast for Odin. If you can't feed your people, there are very tangible negatives to not being able to do that.
Yeah.
In this one, there's not that same mechanic where, you are trying to get resources to expand your community center, but if you don't do that, you'll score less points, but there's no now you have to take a negative victory point token at the end of the game.
I do like that. Another game that I played recently was Fields of Arl. And that one also has penalties in the rulebook for not feeding yourself or being able to sustain your family. But it even says in the rulebook, this is going to be exceedingly rare when you can't do this, because it offers all kinds of ways to change food or have substitutions. Like in that game, instead of having food, or if you don't have food, you can eat your wheat. And then if you don't have wheat, you can eat animals. So there's always a hierarchy that keeps you fed. It might punish you in the long run, but it's not the beggar token from Agricola that is just, that's a game breaker. A 3-point swing in Agricola will absolutely lose you the game.
I almost think the best way that it's handled, though, I don't mind the negative points. If you are unable to strategically take your turn to get the food as a requirement of the game, then I think you deserve something negative for not being able to complete it.
Well,
I think the way that it's best done is in Le Havre, where you get the loan cards
that's a really cool
that
system.
you can then get rid of before the end of the game. Imagine it's similar if in Agricola you take a beggar token, if you're able to then donate food or something that counteracts that later in the game. I think that would be an interesting swap on it.
And see, I think I like the way that Le Havre does it, and I would hate it if Agricola had a way to ameliorate that issue. I think the beggar tokens are enough of an incentive to, I really want to build that room, but I do not want to take negative 3 points out the gate. That's a stone house.
Sure.
A stone room in that game. That would be crazy. So Hallertau, I love it. I think it's great. 10 different resources you have to juggle around in a lot of different ways. Honestly, 11 including jewelry. The decks that change. The decks are a little swingy for me. It definitely feels like a very luck.
It adds some randomness.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not crazy about that. I'm also not crazy about the cards in Agricola, to be honest. But then again, we haven't played with too many different decks in Agricola. I've played with the one main deck, and you destroy me when you get those minor improvements out. Yeah. Hallertau, absolutely fantastic. I'm on a big Uwe Rosenberg kick. I love it. Love it.
Definitely a good game. I don't think it's up there with Agricola, Caverna, Feast for Odin. My next game that I played this week was a new release of a old game, Res Arcana Duo by Thomas Lehmann. It's a 2-player implementation of Res Arcana, which is a tableau builder card game where you have your mage or your spellcaster, and you are laying down artifacts and paying for them in different costs, different resource costs, using their unique abilities to try and synergize and score points.
I love Res Arcana. I would say of the pure tableau builders, Thomas Lehmann hits it out of the park again. Race for the Galaxy is, I think that's my number 2 game right after Spirit Island. Race for the Galaxy is infinitely replayable, especially with the first 2 arcs of the expansion. We still haven't tried the Xeno invasion or the alien artifacts.
We need to play more with the other expansions.
I agree
as much
completely.
as I enjoyed the first 2 for Race for the Galaxy, I feel like the other ones have to be good. We just haven't given them enough chances or whatever.
So this is funny that you mention this, because I feel like Thomas Lehmann might fall short in some of his expansions. And I think Race for the Galaxy is known for hit or miss with the expansions. I don't like Brink of War. I know a lot of people felt like it was a reinvention of that system where they have the victory, courage tokens, whatever they are. The pink tokens that you have in that game, all of a sudden there's a new resource. I certainly am not drawn to the Pearl expansion for Res Arcana, but I love the knife fight in a phone booth that Res Arcana feels like. And I really like Duo, because I also got a copy for myself. It is only 4 mages, so you get 2 to choose from of the 4. The other person gets the other 2. And there's 16 artifact cards. And it's a very streamlined, simple, limited version of the full game. And it folds into the full game so well, but it's a great entry point for someone that hasn't played it. Something about this podcast, I am blue, he is red. We're going to be referring to the people with whom we play games by different colors. So we went to our friends and asked them what colors they would like to be. And we were expecting, here's purple and here's yellow and here's whatever. Well, everyone loves green. So we have a bunch of greens. We have emerald. We have mint. We have shamrock, which I'd never heard of a color called shamrock. And then finally, my favorite, we have our friend that could not decide between chartreuse and pear. So he decided for Sharpear. But more than that, he insisted we call him by his full title, which is Sharpear, the Ultimate Blood Bowl Champion. Fantastic.
Yes. He did win our local Blood Bowl league by the skin of his teeth. It was very close.
I think I came in last.
I think I was second last.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I played Norse. You played Necro?
No, I was playing Korn.
You had some really cool figures for that though.
Yes.
Yeah. Next game that I played Blue Lagoon with my coworkers, and it's a re-implementation of Through the Desert, and I have to say for my part, I definitely prefer Blue Lagoon. They're very different. They're very different games, but I think Blue Lagoon is simple enough that I want to introduce it to everybody. And I like the art, and I like the push and pull of the tile layer.
It's definitely a simpler game, but it can still get so nitty-gritty and tactical when you are at a full game of 4 people and you're trying to, take that narrow path to victory, and someone can block you or, put one of their tiles down. Oh, yeah.
It was phenomenal, and they both fell in love with it immediately, which is just great.
The last game that we played recently was Hitster, designed by Marcus Carleson. Hitster is a party game that has to do with music. Every player is given a year card, 1965, 2010, whatever it is, that's out in front of them. When it comes to be their turn, a song is played, and the person has to choose whether that song was released before or after the year card that's in front of them. If they get it correct, that card comes out, and now they have 2 year cards in front of them, making it a little bit more difficult when the song gets back to them, and they have to then choose between 3 locations to put that card.
We played a 4-player game plus a DJ. Mint was DJ, Emerald and Shamrock were both playing, and Red and myself, Blue, were playing, and it was so much fun. It genuinely, there are very few recommendations for party games you can buy at Target that I actually listen to. And it was genuinely fun. I did not know Shamrock was so knowledgeable about the last 30 years of music.
Incredibly so. I will be the first to admit I'm not a music person. I struggled in that game. There were some times where, I'm trying to decide what year or what slot I'm going to put a card in, and I just see Shamrock shaking his head, and I say, "Ooh, not there. That's not where it's going to go." All right, and then I still get it wrong.
The only issue I really had was the finagliness of having to have a DJ. When Shamrock and I played it right before everyone else got to game night, we just passed my phone back and forth being DJ for each other, which was a little, went back and forth. It wasn't that bad, but it still requires a phone, and I'm somewhat averse to games that require a phone, because you're playing the song out loud, and you're using Spotify, which I'm not crazy about Spotify, but that was the game. I thought it was great.
It was a good game. If I was more into music, I probably would have liked it more.
Probably. So those are the games we played this week. We're going to move on to a segment we are going to call Board Game Standoff, where we're going to choose 2 different games, try to get games that are very similar either in theme or weight or complexity, and pit them against each other. Not to say which one is better, but to say the pros and cons of both, and then to give our choice of the 2 of which one we might choose above the other. This week's games are Knarr by Thomas Dupont, and the other game is Biblios by Steve Finn. One new, one relatively older game against each other.
This is definitely a battle of big games in small boxes. These are both very robust games that are perfectly small. They fit right on your shelf, and they're both fantastic. Knarr is I'm going to call it a tableau builder. And I know that I think you've said you don't think it is, or you don't quite give it the same. It's certainly not like a Res Arcana or a Race for the Galaxy, but you're collecting cards of different colors that are also your resource, because later you end up spending those cards to increase your Knarr, your ship, to make it bigger and better and give you more bonuses.
It's a tableau builder where you can spend your tableau. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of other games that do that, and I'm sure they exist, I'm just not thinking of ones that do.
The only other thing that even at all is similar to me is Mintworks, which is a tiny little box worker placement game where the act of you placing a worker means it goes back into the box, and it's your workers are your resources as well as your action selection mechanism. So it's kind of like that, but yeah, it's an interesting mechanic that really I think is done very well.
Really enjoy Knarr. I don't know that I've ever won, and that's one of those games I don't mind if I don't. I try not to get my ego too high about the board games we're playing with, the toys that we're playing with, but that one especially, I've never hit the stride that you have to get into. It's a very small amount of points, How many rounds do you think a common game of Knarr is? It can't be more than 6 or 7,
Yeah. The end game is initiated as soon as the first player hits 40 points. You finish the round, and then whoever at the end of that final round has the most is the winner. And I would say more often than not, I think the person that hits 40 is not the winner in our experience.
Very much so. I think that's where turn order comes to bite you.
Absolutely.
Because the person that goes out, everyone past them has the chance to have a final turn. So if you are the person that goes last and you are able to hit 40 points, nobody else gets a turn. But if you're first and you hit 40 points, everybody else gets one more turn. And we've seen multiple victories of people that have 43 points over 41 points or something like that, right?
Yes.
I always ignore one thing in that game, and it comes back to be the one thing that would have been the game for me. There's a perpetual points track that you get at the beginning of every turn, or there's the tableau if you just keep it in front of you for long enough.
That perpetual points track, I think that is one of the not the mechanic, but the implementation of it, I think, is one of the worst parts of the game.
Oh, really?
It's so tiny and fiddly, and all of your cubes, you and the other players, are all stacked on top of each other, and it's not like a straight track. It like zigzags, and so sometimes from some angles you can't see how many points you get. That is one of my least favorite things about the game.
I'm going to say two things. One that I love about it and one that I hate about it. One, the artwork and the production of the box, second to none. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of those games you enjoy taking out and looking at how it's made. The artwork is beautiful. The card art is just so pretty. The shades of the 5 colors they got are really beautiful for the cards. Here's where I fall apart with this game, are the player colors.
Oh, they are...
What the hell was going on?
If you didn't bring it up, I was going to.
They've got black, brown, natural wood, and... Gray. Okay, we named ourselves blue and red because I'm always the blue player. He's always the red player. We don't know who to choose.
Well, I was just saying, what do we do? We say, we take the components out and we say, I think this is the most red.
Is
this the reddest color in here?
I guess gray is the bluest.
Yeah.
And then it's just, I mean, it's such a silly thing to say, but it really does make it where we're so used to playing our own colors. I look for the blue pieces on boards. I always look for the blue pieces. If I go to someone's house, I had a friend that I went to their house to play board games. They were board game people, and the host's favorite color was blue, and she got to be blue. And I'm going to absolutely give that up if I'm at someone's house. I was so mixed up and kept moving her pieces that entire game.
I remember that game.
It was Dinosaur Island.
Yes, I do remember that game.
I moved her piece so many times that I was like, I have no idea where you are. Can we just give her like a 10-point swing? But they also dominated us at that game too.
The other issue that I have, and it's only an issue, I think, because of the player colors, are the little player point track around the outside, because one's like a dragon, and then one's like a sea monster, and then one's like a bird thing, and they're all such similar shapes and sort of similar colors that sometimes they're hard to tell apart.
All right, that's Knarr. Highly recommended. Small box, still very available.
The game that Knarr is going up against this week is Biblios. And my oh my, is Biblios a good game. By Steve Finn, published by
ELO.
Biblios is a multi-phase game where you have some amazing mechanics and implementations of mechanics. I know you always rave about the I split you choose, which is fantastic.
The first phase is I split you choose, where you get to draw one card at a time, apportion it to an open forum for anybody else to take, one for the auction in the second round, and one guaranteed to yourself. So in that way, it feels like an I split you choose, just kind of out of order.
Sure.
Something like Hanamikoji, you get to choose in what way you split, and that you split and they choose. In this way, if I decide to take that 3 brown for myself, and I put a 3 coin in the auction, all that's left is whatever I top deck, and that might be the 4 brown. You run that risk, and that's one of the best parts of Biblios, is the tension of when you're going to give up something to your opponent. I love it. I really love it, and that's half the game. That's only half the game. So the other thing we just talked about, Blue Lagoon. Blue Lagoon is played over 2 rounds. The first round, you're setting up the board for the second round. Biblios, I would say the main thrust of the game, and a lot of your decisions that come down to winning the game come in that second phase. I guess it also depends on when the purple cards come out.
I think the second phase has so much more tension and gravitas too, because the second phase is where you are trying to get all the cards you need out of the silent auction in order to score points. In Biblios, there are a certain number of dies of different colors that have their pips being the amount of points they're worth. And throughout the game, there are some mechanics that allow you to increase them or decrease them. So you know, based upon the card that's up in that silent auction, whether you are trying to go after that color or not.
I will say it's not a silent auction.
You're correct.
It's just a bidding. It's just a bidding round. I love Biblios. Every single time I play it, I've never regretted bringing it out. The more I play it, the more I love it, the more strategy I see in it. The worst part of Biblios, bar none, is the theme and the art. It's abysmal. I play that game, I go, that's such a good game. I'm so happy that we played that. I put the cards away and the dice away, which is so easy to do. The box is part of the game. It has the information on the inside. You close that cool magnetic clasp, and then you look at that monk with the bald spot, and you just go, I can't believe I dedicated 40 minutes to this ugly, ugly game. The theme is so dull. It's hard to pitch it to people. They have re-released it.
Yes, there's a game called For the King and Me, which is a re-implementation of the game. It's 90% the same. They've retooled a couple of mechanics, and then they redid the art for it.
The question, the $50,000 question, which would you prefer if you had to choose one of them to play and not the other?
So I think I'm going to disagree with you. I like Knarr over Biblios. They're both fantastic games, but I think I like the tableau building aspect more than the auction part.
I completely understand. I might go for Knarr if it didn't feel so multiplayer solitaire compared to Biblios, which feels, I don't want to say like a Knizia game, but it is like a Knizia game where the other players are your opponents. It's not the game you're playing, it's the other people you're playing. And that alone can drive a lot of my reasons to choose that game. I completely understand why I choose Knarr. It's a really good game. And it's not an easy choice, but for me, Biblios wins every time. I think it's my favorite small box game.
I completely understand. I will, if someone comes up to me and says, you want to play this one, you want to play that one, we're going to play either. They're both fantastic. Biblios is great. I prefer Knarr.
That's fine. That's fine. And now, I don't know if I told you about this, we have a German correspondent who's going to speak to the people a little bit about a German designer. Take it away, Blau.
This week on Uwe Corner, we are going to talk about the game Glass Road. Glass Road is about living in the Bavarian forest where you are collecting resources to make glass and brick. And you use those resources to build buildings in the forest, the Bavarian forest of glass and brick and clay and wood. You will build these resources on your wheel with a rondelle. When you run out of glass, you are done. When you finish the game, buildings will be everywhere. This is the game Glass Road by Uwe Rosenberg.
Now we're going to move on to our main topic for the week, the worst games to set up. Blue, what came to mind as soon as we were talking about coming up with this?
So the first thing that came to mind, more than anything else, was trying to choose a variety of different experiences that are tough to get to the table for different reasons. My number one encompasses a few of them, and it's one that I find is most difficult for me to get to the table.
I feel like we're going to have some overlap.
I'd be very surprised if we didn't have any overlap. My number one game that is an absolute bear to set up is Sidereal Confluence.
Oh, yes.
That is such a table hog.
You know, that wasn't on my list, but that's a great choice, and it fills some of the same kind of category that I do have on mine.
So the problem, first and foremost, I want to say I love Sidereal Confluence, but it is something you have to plan out where people are going to sit before you start playing. I think if you're going to get the most enjoyment out of it. If you have a table like I do, I have a dining room table It's nothing crazy. It's not a board gaming table, and it seats a real claustrophobic 8.
I would argue that any table you play board games on is a board gaming table.
That's a lovely thought. This game is entirely negotiation. So when you set it up, you have to make a decision where the tech tree is going to be, where this portion is going to be, where the different players are going to sit. If you're going to have people over for that, it is an event game, much like another game on this list that I'm going to talk about.
You also need to prepare for expansion, because every player is going to get 20, 25 cards in front of them that give them different powers and bonuses. And as you say, it's a negotiation. So if I'm at the one head of the table and you're at the other, I'm saying, I need some blue cubes. Do you have anything that can make blue cubes?
You say that they add room for more expansion of cards. That's just the cards you get as a normal process of playing the game. There's other ways to get other people's cards, which is encouraged, which is one of the coolest parts of that game. If you're sitting down at the other end of the table, we're not doing business together. And maybe that is definitely built into the mechanic. I can understand that. But then on top of that, if you did want to put this so that you set it up before people got there, and I'm sure an argument is, why don't you just have your friends set it up with you? Of course. But if we're going to have to relearn the game because we play it so infrequently that everyone's going to be like, hey, I don't remember how to play this, to get it on the table, have it so that everyone can choose a seat to sit with a certain faction so that they can relearn the game and then start to play is always nice.
As Blue has said, Sidereal Confluence is a great game. The negotiation that you have to, participate in order to win, to have a chance, is just, it's makes for a great time.
The reason I say it's tough to set up is that not only do you have to figure out where everyone's sitting, at least in some capacity, you have to account for where some of the tiles or the cards that have to be visible to everyone have to live on the table. And that means some people are going to have to stand up and walk around, essentially. So that is my number one game that I dread setting up, but I want to play. I love playing it because it does foster this unique interaction between players that is so integral to our hobby.
The game that I chose is, and I'm choosing more of a mechanic than a particular game. There are mini games or there are games that do this. I'm choosing Undaunted.
Oh, really?
Particularly...
campaign setup?
No, it's not even that, although that's a good point. Particularly the modular map setup. I love modular maps in games. I think they help with replayability so much, but I think I tend more towards randomized modularity. In Undaunted, you have these square tiles in most of them. Some of the new games are different. Callisto has a big full board. And in the Normandy, North Africa, you've got these square tiles that each have a number on them, and some of them are two-sided, and you have to lay them out in a very particular pattern for the balance of the scenario that you're playing. And if one of those is out of place, that maybe gives good cover closer to your starting point, then it could mess the whole balance of the scenario up. And I find that is the having to be so diligent about placing it kind of takes a little bit of the fun away from me.
I definitely don't like that aspect of Undaunted. As much as I love Undaunted, setting up the map with all the squares, finding the specific squares, that is definitely one that I do not enjoy setting up. I'll give a caveat to the Stalingrad one, because as you play through Stalingrad, you destroy key tiles. And that makes setting up the board oh, that's right, we lost Pavlov's house, that kind of stuff plays into a little bit more fun portion of the setup for me.
I can completely understand that. Undaunted by Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson, published by Osprey Games. It's a great game. I'm not particularly good at it, but the game setup has nothing to do with that. I feel like I just don't make good tactical choices in that game. But it definitely is always we got to sit here for 5 minutes and figure this out.
I know there's a solo mode with the reinforcements, but I am not the biggest fan of David Sertzi solo rules. The only solo game of his that I've really, really enjoyed is Imperium. And speaking of that, quite the setup.
If I had to guess, you're going to talk about all of the different types of cards that you have and getting them in the right orders and the right orientations.
I don't really care about that.
Oh.
Are you talking about individual faction cards?
Yeah, the faction cards.
Couldn't care less.
There's the ones with the stars and the ones with the circles
Genuinely,
and the ones with the moons.
That is the one I don't care about.
Interesting.
Because I'll tell you this right now. When I sleeved that game and put it all into my gigantic Horizons organizer that I bought on Etsy. All of those I put in the specific order of star cards, dot card, moon cards, starting in the Unrest deck, faction card, nation card, and then put them in the thing. So I know exactly how each one of those sets up. I can get them all set up very, very quickly with just those things. The one I hate doing is the market. The market, you have to separate the region cards, the uncivilized cards, the civilized cards, and the, what are they called? Tributaries.
But not all of them.
What do you mean?
Because some of them you keep in the deck. You have, like, small decks.
But that's what I'm saying. You have to separate them out, draw a number of cards for the number of players, put those there, then shuffle all of the rest of them together. It's so daunting to be like, hey, let's play this game that, by the way, with more than 2 players, is gonna take, like,
2.5, 3 hours.
Genuinely,
for sure.
Yeah. And then if I'm playing Japan, that's real bad.
You can agree. And I very much like Imperium. I have not certainly played it as much as you have. I know Shamrock plays with us fairly frequently.
Emerald, too. Emerald really likes it.
I don't know. Maybe I've only played with Emerald
Once, I think. But I've played with her many times.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think you are far more adept at the game than I am, than Shamrock is. And maybe that just comes from the amount of experience you have playing it, or you are just naturally good at that type of thinking, that type of game, but...
Doubt it. As far as deck builders go, I think that was absolutely one of my top 5 deck builders. I like to play it solo, and because there's so much replayability with the option of having what faction you're playing and against what faction the AI takes on, and the David Cersei rules for that is, oh my god, genius. The flowchart for that, I can get behind. The flowchart for Undaunted, I looked at once and I said, this is not what I like.
I get that.
Yeah. So what's your next one?
So my next one is, again, it's kind of a genre of game. As you mentioned, you like playing Imperium solo. I've been playing a lot more solo games in the last 12 months than I ever have before, specifically campaign games. When a campaign game doesn't have a really streamlined method of picking up where you left off, I find it difficult to put it back on the table. You know, if I'm going to have to go through my notebook and figure out, what cards did I have in my hand? Were these ones out on the table already? Were they spent? You know, I find that really dampens my enjoyment. Fortunately, I have kind of alleviated some of that by getting a board game table so I can leave it set up underneath. Things that happen, sometimes that tabletop stays on longer than I want it to. Campaign games, I've really been enjoying them. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Sleeping Gods by Ryan Laukit. Very fun campaign games. I think I originally was a little bit skeptical because you can play it co-op, which I'm not a big fan of, but solo, I've been having a lot of fun. It's like a RPG video game in board game format, which is great.
I have heard you say just the best things about Sleeping Gods, and it seems like it's a super fun game.
Yes, campaign games, I find that unless they're super particular about how you put stuff back in the box, sometimes they can, fall by the wayside.
Absolutely. The next game issue that I want to talk about includes a game that is near and dear to my heart, Feast for Odin by Uwe Rosenberg. I love that game. I love playing it. It provides so many opportunities. I call it the Skyrim of board games. If you want to try one thing, you can do anything you want in that game to go in different routes. Skyrim is great, yeah. I would say that I know you like Skyrim. Those of us that are in the know actually say that Morrowind is the better
God, I hate
game.
You right now. Oh, I hate you right now.
Feast for Odin is a game that is so sandboxy, and as a result, you have to set up all the components so that they're all available to everybody. You can go a hunting, you can go an islanding, you can go a farming, you can go a cowing. And with the expansion, with the Norwegians expansion, which I will never play without that expansion from now on, it genuinely makes the game better in every single way, in my opinion. It adds pigs, it adds horses, it adds a fifth column. There's so many great things about A Feast for Odin, but it is absolutely daunting to set up. I have bought an organizer, which definitely helps in some portions, but you're still putting out all the pieces of treasure. You're still putting out the mountain strips with the resources. You're still organizing the islands by their type. You're still making room after you put everything out for the 2 gigantic trays that have all the different polyomino tiles. I have organized mine in such a way that I've gotten it down to 2 trays. 2 of the black plastic trays that came in the game. The third one came with Norwegians to add all the stuff, but it would have made the lid lift and all the crazy stuff. So I did get it down to 2 trays, which it's cramped, but it works. But setting everything else up and then you kind of assigning roles to the different people. Hey, you're going to be in charge of refilling the land strips. I'll make sure I turn these over during the harvest. And everyone's got to get the specific harvest. It's a bugbear to set up. But once it's set up, it's so joyful to play. It's a top 3 Uwe for me, for sure. But there is something that disincentivizes me to play it in the form of setup.
I understand. It's so interesting that you bring Uwe up because my last thing that I chose was probably my favorite game, which is Caverna, also by Uwe. And we've touched on the issues that I have with it a few times throughout our discussion here. But the main thing, the thing that just prevents it from being put out is the 70 plus unique tiles that have to be accessible to every player. They're tiny, and if you don't know what they are, then they might as well not be on the table for you because they're integral to playing the game and doing well.
I completely agree. I did recently pick up Caverna, and I did it knowing that I had just ordered this set of wooden slats that have the buildings carved into them as far as like spots for them, because my biggest problem every single time we've played Caverna is for some reason I am always sitting with those friggin' buildings upside down to where I am. And it's such an annoying thing. If I had to choose between preset buildings and the cards from Agricola, I would choose the buildings. But I have to have a menu or something. Is there a menu in the game where you can pass it around to show people what they have?
The rulebook has a explanation of all of the rooms, but no, there's not like a good player aid. I absolutely adore Caverna. I think that it's a little bit of a lighter implementation of Agricola. It's not quite as tight of an economy. It does have more breathing room. Yes. There's also some of the negatives, the begging tokens if you can't feed your dwarf family.
I don't know we've ever seen somebody get a begging token in all the games we've played.
And that's true, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Fields of Arl, how it's few and far between. I feel like it's the same thing for Caverna.
Yeah. It's a really fun game.
When the game board has like, this deck goes here, these things go there, I love that. It makes it so much easier.
I think another thing that it helps with is if you're playing with people who haven't played the game before, and you can tell them, hey, put this deck where it goes, put this deck where it goes, shuffle it beforehand, you can assign people to help set up. And I think that's something that we haven't talked about enough, is that when we get together with our friends, everyone instantly joins in to get the game set up. And it's something that is such a help to, I'm the one that's bringing the game to the thing, or you're bringing the game to it. You're not responsible alone. The people that are there, I hope that every single time you've got a game that you're putting out, I go, what can I do? What can I set up? You'll hand me a deck of cards, shuffle this and put this over here. Deal 5 to each player, whatever it is, right? Everyone pitches in to make a many hands make light work, which is a tenet that we should be applying for all board games.
And that doesn't just apply to the setup, but the breakdown as well at the end of a game.
Yes, cleaning up the game at the end is absolutely integral to the game experience. It's putting everything away. Even if you've been invited to a game, help put the game away. Don't stand up from the table until the game's fully put away.
Completely agree.
So that brings us to the end of the episode. We want to end every episode the same way, by giving credence to the name of the podcast, and we're going to ask the question. Red, you like to say it with me?
Let's do it.
Does it fart? Now we're going to bring a game to the table. This is a party game. It's a larger box that has somewhat flimsy sides. We, in our board game group, love the game Telestrations. For one big reason, Sharphair, the Ultimate Blood Bowl champion, cannot draw to save his life.
It's so bad, his contact photo in my phone is one of his drawings.
That's exactly right. So when I found the big box version, I picked it up, and I could not help but notice that every single time I close this box, there is the most gorgeous Boxfart. That is going to be the inaugural Boxfart. And here we go. 12-player party pack. I mean, that's fantastic. That's a winner right there.
I think that was a 5 out of 5.
That's a 5 out of 5. This podcast stands by its rating of out of 5. Telestrations 12-player party pack is a 5 out of 5 Boxfart on this, the inaugural podcast of Boxfart. I've been Blue.
And I'm Red.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Boxfart Podcast. If you'd like to contact either Red or Blue, feel free to send an email to redblueboxfart, all one word, at gmail.com. If you feel so inclined, leave a review for us on the platform of your choice. And always remember, a piece laid is a piece played. Unless you didn't really mean to play it, in which case, just go ahead and chill out, man. It's a friendly game.